I still remember the day my doctor looked at me, took a long breath, and said, "There's something about your body that most people will never understand." I didn't know what those words really meant at the time. For years, I believed I was just different in ways I couldn't explain. I thought everyone carried secrets about themselves. I thought everyone looked in the mirror and wondered why they never quite fit into the picture the world expected. Growing up in a small town, I learned very early that people like simple answers. They wanted to know if you were a boy or a girl. They wanted everything neatly labeled. Life didn't work that way for me. My parents loved me deeply, but I could always tell there was a conversation they weren't ready to have. Whenever I asked questions about my medical appointments, they smiled, changed the subject, and told me I'd understand when I was older. Those appointments happened more often than my friends realized. While they were spending summer afternoons at the lake, I was sitting in waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant, watching doctors study charts that had my name on them. I didn't understand why they always spoke quietly whenever I walked into the room. One afternoon, when I was about 12, I accidentally overheard a conversation outside the exam room. "Have they explained the diagnosis yet?" one doctor asked. "Not yet," another answered. The family wanted to wait. I didn't know what diagnosis they meant, but I knew they were talking about me. That single moment changed everything. From then on, I started paying attention to every whispered conversation, every worried glance between my parents, every medical form they tried to keep turned away from me. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for the truth. And when I finally learned it years later, it explained my entire life, but it also raised questions I never imagined I'd have to answer. The hardest part wasn't discovering that I had been born with an intersex variation. The hardest part was realizing how many people believed they already knew my story before I ever had the chance to tell it. I spent years wondering who I was supposed to be. Eventually, I learned that the answer didn't belong to anyone else. It belonged to me. I spent a long time trying to act like everything was normal. At school, I laughed when everyone else laughed. I played along with conversations that made me uncomfortable. Whenever my classmates started talking about puberty, dating, or how their bodies were changing, I mostly stayed quiet. I became really good at listening instead of speaking. People thought I was just shy. The truth was, I was afraid that if I said the wrong thing, someone would realize I wasn't experiencing life the same way they were. Every year seemed to bring another doctor's appointment. Sometimes my mom would squeeze my hand in the parking lot before we walked inside. "You don't have to worry," she'd say with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I wanted to believe her. Children notice things adults think they're hiding. I noticed how serious the conversations became whenever another specialist joined the room. I noticed the stack of medical files growing thicker every year. I noticed how often doctors asked me to step outside while they spoke privately with my parents. One evening, after another long appointment, I finally couldn't hold it in anymore. I looked at my dad while we were eating dinner. "Am I sick?" He froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. My mom looked down at her plate. "No," my dad said softly. "You're not sick. Then why do I keep seeing doctors?" Neither of them answered right away. That silence hurt more than anything they could have said. A few weeks later, my parents sat me down in the living room. I could tell something was different. My mom's eyes were already filled with tears. My dad kept rubbing his hands together like he was trying to find the right words. "We've been waiting until you were old enough," he finally said. I remember my heart pounding so loudly that I barely heard the next sentence. "When you were born, the doctors discovered that your body developed differently. He didn't rush. He explained that I had been born with an intersex variation, a natural difference in sex, development that affects a small number of people. He told me it wasn't anyone's fault. It wasn't something I caused. It wasn't something that could be blamed on my parents." I sat there, trying to process everything. "So, what does that make me?" I asked. My mom reached across the couch and held my hand. "It makes you our child." That answer made me cry. Not because it solved everything, because it reminded me that, despite all the uncertainty, I was still loved. Over the next few months, I asked hundreds of questions. Some had simple answers, others didn't. I learned that even doctors don't always have every answer. Human biology isn't always as simple as the boxes people check on forms. That realization changed how I looked at the world. But knowing the truth didn't magically make life easier. In fact, it made some parts even harder. The biggest challenge wasn't understanding my body. It was deciding who else deserved to know. Every new friendship felt like a risk. Every relationship came with a question hanging over my head. When do I tell them? And what happens if they walk away?